What are Finfluencers and how do they impact the retail investor market? My name is Vinay Pranjivan. I come from DECO, the Portuguese Consumer Association, and I'm a senior economist. Finfluencers combine the term from financial and influencers. They typically engage with the consumer using platforms such as YouTube, TikTok, or X, or former Twitter. They provide information, they provide advice, they try to simplify information, they try to give guidance. Their intervention became popular in the recent times, especially after COVID, where more and more retail investors tried to find information or guidance or advice through these platforms. And their main advantage is exactly that, accessibility. They become much more proximal to the consumers or the retail investors because they are using these platforms, which of course have a huge reach. And some of them, influencers, have actually their own follower base, which can be much more higher than a typical financial advisor. In that sense, they have these opportunities and these risks associated to their activities. When we look at the opportunities from their existence or from their activities, we have the fact that they actually can be promoters of financial literacy or financial education, in that they bridge the gap that exists from the traditional financial service providers and financial advisors and the way that consumers actually look at them or actually can reach them. So we can actually promote the use of influencers or the so-called Finfluencers in those goals of promoting financial education, financial literacy, promoting savings, promoting investment, at least capacity for investments, and also some awareness. However, we also must acknowledge that with these type of opportunities and this type of reach, there's also a huge number of challenges or risks posed from their activities. The first type of risk is the fact that many of these influencers or Finfluencers are not financial advisors or are not credited as financial advisors. So by not being accredited as financial advisors, their information, their multiplying of knowledge may be limited. Secondly, they also may have there is an accountability issue where by not being accredited or recognized as financial advisors, their actions or their information or their guidance can eventually lead to some mis-selling, some losses, where then investors may try to find some accountability for them, and they will not get answers because they are not supervised or they are not accredited or recognized as investment advisors. Then you also have the fact that in many cases you have a multiplying of very simple or simplified information, where most of the details and the data that needs to be assessed before actually placing an investment, before actually engaging in such products, especially in the complex ones, for example, cryptos, investors rely on very oversimplified information, which comes with the typical information or outputs from these influencers in those platforms. So by being oversimplified, they may actually be not sufficiently detailed, and they may lead to somewhat precipitated investment, which should be much more detailed and in analysis by the potential investor. So there are cases where investors then had losses because they didn't fully understand the product, and then when they tried to get some, let's say, compensation, there was no real way to have recourse to any type of sort of a compensation or accountability. Thirdly, there's also the fact that in many of these cases there's sort of a rush imposed or created by the Finfluencers. So in some cases we have influencers that are acting on very quick information and trying to multiply this information and trying to get the follower to engage in the product or in that activity very quickly. So promoting the so-called FOMO, the fear of missing out on the user or the investor. In doing that, they also create the so-called herd mentality, where if you have so many followers saying that we've done this, following that advice, you have a third or a fourth or a fifth follower trying to get there because of the, let's say, the fear of missing out. And finally, there's also the question of conflict of interest, where the financial influencer may actually be paid to be multiplying that information or sending out that advice of a specific product, platform, or intermediary. So the question is this type of activity beneficial or risky for the investor market? Well, the fact that there is a potential conflict of interest is a huge risk for the markets and for the investors, and therefore it merits already a look from the regulators and supervisors. And that's exactly what's happening across the globe. We see, for example, in the US, the Securities and Exchange Committee is also already looking at it, and at the EU level, you have ESMA, the European Securities and Markets Authority, already addressing these questions, trying to get the framework to include these activities and making sure that, for example, it's transparent, that if the certain influencer is acting as an advisor, there should be a disclosure of his activity, his or her activity, but also a disclosure about potential remuneration behind that type of activity. You also have the UK Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, issuing this type of guidance. And for example, the market I'm coming from, Portugal, the CMVM, the Securities and Markets Authority, is also looking into this issue, and it's been recently included in a topical guide, investor guide, with some info on how they can be addressing this from a regulatory perspective. Having in mind the reach of these type of influencers in promoting and giving guidance and also influencing investors, it is important that there is regulation, there are rules to make sure that their activity is actually safe, and it provides sufficient framework for their participation in the market towards promoting financial inclusion, but also investor protection.